Hi everyone, I'm Miguel Rivera, and this is Real Talk with Miguel Rivera. You're listening to Real Talk with Miguel Rivera, a podcast that inspires individuals to connect, build community, and pursue their passion. My name is Miguel Rivera, and I'm an educator, community advocate, and executive director of Dream Big Project. And I'm sitting down with passionate and inspiring individuals to talk about their stories, the lessons they've learned, and how they're making an impact. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, humans of all ages. My name is Miguel Rivera, and I am your host today on Real Talk with Miguel Rivera. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of hosting a remarkable guest, Jenna Hardy-Surina, a licensed marriage and family therapist who helps people who've had their life flipped upside down by a diagnosis, injury, or disability and are struggling with hopelessness and finding themselves again by rewriting a bigger and better story for the next chapter of their life. You can learn more about the amazing work Jenna is doing at her website at themedicaltherapist.com or check her out on Instagram at themedicaltherapist. Thank you for joining us, Jenna. Appreciate you making your way here, and it's good to have you on board.
It's good to see you again.
Likewise.
Been hanging out a lot recently.
I know, right? There's been some things happening recently that required a lot of our time and effort and attention.
Yes, absolutely. And you did a fabulous job hosting our event. And so we're just super thankful for you for doing that for us.
Thank you guys for having me. It was really an honor and a privilege to represent, be involved, just host. That was the first time, maybe the second time that was able to be in front of a large audience, right? So just to provide some context for people, right? Be Perfect recently had, or would you mind talking about the Be Perfect event? Go for it.
Yeah, so the Be Perfect Foundation is a nonprofit started by Hal Hargrave Jr., and its whole purpose is to financially support people with paralysis. So that can be in the terms of getting the adaptive equipment they need to be able to live their best lives, or funding so they can get the proper therapy they need to do rehabilitation. And so this nonprofit's been around for long time now, and they started doing yearly, or now kind of every year and a half, galas. So it's a scholarship gala to raise funds to continue to support. And so this was our 10th annual gala, and it was quite the event, as now doing it in the 10th time. We had over 1,000 attendees there, so it was a packed house.
It was packed.
And this year we asked you to be our host. Normally it's it's been me or Big Hal who have done the hosting, because we just have been around for a long time, of course, and just know what the gig is. And it was just easier because 100% volunteers put off this event.
And there was a lot of volunteers.
There's a lot of volunteers.
Lots. Like literally every part of the venue is like, there's volunteers there running it.
Yeah, it's so that, their big mission statement is that 99 cents to every dollar donated goes to the client. So really, no funding comes to us on the back end. So, but you hosted the night for us, and it was wonderful.
It was amazing. I had an amazing experience. I really, when I was first told about it, I was like, oh yeah, like let's do it. Like I'm excited. I'm on board. I'm down. A lot of times throughout, until the actual day of the event, I didn't feel nervous, because a lot of times people would ask me, like, how do you feel? Are you nervous? And, this and that, the usual kind of thing that people talk about before performing or going onto a stage. And I didn't feel that at all. And I was waiting to feel that, to be honest with you. I was waiting, like, when is it going to kick in? Like, when am I going to start being nervous? When is my stomach going to hurt? Like, when am I going to just be like tense? I didn't quite feel that at all. And I usually do that.
Well, that's not surprising. Look, here you are hosting a podcast. I mean, you're just kind of a natural, like this works for you, I think, as a person and a personality. And obviously, you're running your own nonprofit, you're running your own world. And so you're kind of you have to be on top of your stuff.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that you kind of already have systems in place in your own world that allowed you to be prepared for this event. Like this is already what you're doing
Right.
in your day-to-day life,
Mm-hmm. It's the norm. Right.
managing all this stuff. So we knew you coming in, we're going to be well prepared
Right.
to handle
I appreciate that.
that event.
Was that the backstory in the background? Miguel be the perfect person for this.
Yeah. Well, I think actually it was me, because we had just done our first podcast
Right.
together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we just had a natural conversation and banter back and forth. And
Right,
obviously
right.
when you're hosting a big gala like that, yeah, it's slightly scripted, but you need to be comfortable with having dialogue or going off
Right.
the cusp.
Delivering that message. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had brought up your name because I was like, I said, oh my God, when Miguel and I met for his podcast, we talked the hour before the podcast. We talked an hour through his podcast.
Yeah.
We talked for like 3 hours straight. This guy's got, Terry would say, the gift and gab.
Right. Right.
And so, and obviously you're a part of the community.
Right. Of course.
You are also somebody who goes through the perfect step
Right.
and has interface with the Be Perfect Foundation. And we just wanted somebody to be able to speak to the donors in the community from the community.
Right.
So
Exactly.
we were excited to, and once again, we just knew you were.
And I feel like I feel like it went well. I feel like,
yeah,
the expectation was met in a sense. That was one thing that I wanted to make sure too. Obviously, all the things you mentioned, being a part of the community, attending the perfect step, me doing my thing, like all of that is true. At the same time, me as an individual and the person I am, I want to make sure that I'm delivering, what is expected or what we're aiming for. Right. And I felt personally like after the feedback after the event, like, the actual program, so much, I heard so much from everyone, and I was like, oh wow, like, thank you. That made me feel good. I was like, sweet, like people enjoyed it. People were impacted. People felt it. People shared their stories with me, and all of that.
Well, I think what we were really trying to focus on, or what was really important to us this year was, and we talked about this in our last podcast episode, so I won't go down the rabbit hole of the ableism conversation, but we really wanted to, be showing that we are progressing as a nonprofit and as a community too, in the way that we view people with injuries. And I think before, obviously, our intention was never to throw a pity party, but it can look, when you have two able-bodied people up on stage helping kind of tell stories and raise money, it can look kind of victim-y.
Right.
Like, oh, here we are able-bodied because the other people in chairs are so helpless. They can't even be up here. Right.
Yeah.
And so we have to raise money for these people and help them. It has a little bit of an undertone of a victim narrative in it.
I see.
And so it was really important for us this year to not only show our donors, but to show, of course, it was 50 to 60 people living in wheelchairs at this event, which was a pretty massive attendance. Normally it's donors and communities that come out, but that was a big show up.
Yeah.
And we wanted to deliver the message too that you're not a victim. This is just something unfortunate that's happened to you.
Exactly.
And when you are up on stage in a chair yourself and you're hosting the whole night, for a lot of people who are new to this injury, it's kind of like an oh wow moment, because it's like, look at him up here doing this thing in front of 1,000 people, telling our story, but from a way that's preaching positivity and hope. It's a better message.
Right. It's that representation.
Yes.
And that's why I think that, it matters. I'm so big on representation across, every level, everywhere, because just going to that, right? People with disabilities, whatever disability it is, just in general, being able to see yourself in a role that you don't usually see yourself in. And that's powerful and impactful, right? So if people can see that and feel that, that can change everything, that can spark anything. And even after the program, I believe his name is Scott, I think. He's one of the ambassadors for, oh my gosh, why can't I think of the foundation? Triumph Foundation, yeah. Yeah. So he approached me and said just that, like, it was really good to see you up there because I was able to see myself. Literally, and we have like similar injuries, like levels and everything. He was like, it's good to show what it looks like on a daily basis for someone.
Oh, that warms my heart.
We
I mean, look, we had you, and then of course Taylor,
Right.
Lindsay, Noel up
Mm-hmm.
there,
Mm-hmm.
and so we really, I mean, that was, and even the stories that we delivered this year. Last year, the stories were really focused on the tragedy, which was good. I mean, it's good. People need to hear those stories, but
Right.
this year we didn't really focus at all. We
Mm-mm.
told really, I mean, people would say, "Yeah, I got in a car accident, whatever,"
Right.
but there was no extra spending time on the injury. We really were
Mm-mm.
talking about the present day and what are people doing now, and
Right.
how do donations to the Be Perfect Foundation help support people's lives to look like this.
Exactly.
And so we were really focusing on the present and the future. And then, of course, having you up there, I'm just so glad to hear that that was somebody's comment to you, because that was really
Yes.
our goal.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I wanted to share that, because someone literally said that, you know, and I was talking to him for like a solid 20 minutes and we exchanged information, but he was just he's like pinpointing how, you know, it's good to see, it's good to show people what it looks like, you know, on the inside when behind the doors, right? You know, getting up in the morning, brushing your teeth. Like he started pinpointing things that he's seen in the video. You know, brushing your teeth is good for people to see that, and I'm glad that they've seen it, and I really connected to that. So he was just thanking me, and so it was good to hear that. You know,
Yeah, well, thank you to our videographer team.
Yeah.
We have Millennial Pixels. They're always amazing and do amazing things for the Be Perfect Foundation, but they helped us subcontract another videographer this year. And I think his company's called, if I can drop his company, Golden Eagle Creative.
Yes.
And his name's John, and he was amazing. And he made
John,
those videos, and he just killed it.
Yeah, crushed it.
Killed it. And we're known for our videos.
Right.
That's like our thing. And we
Right.
always have to be like kind of like
Mm-hmm.
stepping it up each
Yeah.
year, which is like a lot of pressure
That
on year
is.
10, because like when people come, they come to see the impactful videos
Right.
that we make. And
Right.
he just hit it out of the park.
Yeah, I think what I like too about the venue itself, all the screens, because there was so many
Yes.
people,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Huge, like
5 large screens.
literally. And I remember being on stage and trying to look at the very last table, and I can't see that far.
Right.
I was like, no wonder these screens are here,
Right.
you know,
Well, we learn
because
every year.
right.
Yeah.
That
So
was
we've learned that
huge.
from a previous event where people were like, I can't see or I can't hear. And we're like, oh, yeah, well, there is 1,000 of you. In here.
Right, exactly.
So
And it was both ways, right?
Yep.
There were like 2 screens there, 2 screens there, and then the center stage.
Yeah.
And I thought that was cool.
It's a massive production, and we wouldn't be able to do it without the hundreds of volunteers
Right.
that help us every year.
Right,
So,
right.
but yeah, you did fabulous. We were just like so grateful and thankful, and
I
you killed
appreciate
it. And I'm
that.
so happy that that message was delivered. Yeah.
Yeah.
People, delivered the message, and, so.
No,
super cool.
definitely. So just to transition a little bit, I know your roots, or you have a background with the Be Perfect
Yes.
Foundation, right?
Yes.
Can we transition to more of your background, your story? I remember you previously talked about how you started with Be Perfect and Project Walk.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that, and then maybe a little bit about some of the items you brought to talk about after that? So I want
Sure.
to dive into that too.
Yeah. So just my little background is that so Hal Hargrave Jr., who he himself got into a really bad accident that left him as a quadriplegic. Him and I
Right.
went to school together, elementary school through high school. So I was
Okay.
in college at the time. Actually, I'm a year or two older than Hal. When I heard that Hal had gotten injured, and the Claremont community was kind of wrapping their arms around him and his family during that time.
Right.
And so Hal was inspired. Well, of course, goes and looks for his own rehab. At the time, Project Walk was the paralysis rehab down in Carlsbad. So he was driving down there to do rehab, got, immersed in the community, met a lot of really wonderful people, but realized how tragic this injury is in the way of finances. And it's kind of like weddings and
huge.
funerals. They just mark up the prices on all these things that are a necessity to this community. You can speak to that more than I can. And so he started the Be Perfect Foundation as a way of supporting those people with those needs.
Right.
And so then I was living in San Diego at the time. I was running Motorola's Wellness Center. I have a background in exercise physiology. And I was visiting him when he was doing his rehab at Project Walk Carlsbad. I come and hang out, and I'm like, wow, this is really this is like wild what they're doing here. This is
Yeah.
a really cool place, you know?
Right.
And I
Right.
was like, can I get a job here? And so I ended up getting an aide position, so an assistant position at Project Walk Carlsbad. And right around that time, Hal and his family were talking about opening the first franchise of that, which is now the Perfect Step,
Perfect
in
step.
his hometown of Claremont. And so then that came to fruition, and Hal's like, do you want to move back home? We can offer you a specialist job up here and you can
Oh,
help us
wow.
open up the facility. And so I moved back to Claremont and was one of the first of 4
Oh,
specialists out of the Perfect Step, in which we were the only ones at the time doing the rehabilitation
wow.
for the little small community we were in at the
Right.
time.
Right.
And then I mean, it's grown. You
Yeah.
see now it's
Look at
grown
now. I
since
was just
then. They
gonna
have
say,
hundreds of clients,
yeah.
attending every week, and
So you've literally been there from the very beginning.
very beginning. So I wasn't really involved in the Be Perfect Foundation side
Oh,
of it
okay.
though until I was a specialist in Claremont, and maybe about their 5th event. So year 5, I think ahead of time I had approached the Hargraves and I said, "Hey, I have a background. I mean, I was an event planner at one point at the Claremont colleges. I helped them in their advancement office do event fundraising for student scholarships. So I have this other background." I said, can I be helpful? And they threw me on the program committee for the Be Perfect Foundation. And I've been there since the 5th gala, helping them,
Wow.
put
So
together.
you were with Project Walk, the Perfect Step, for a few years before
Yes.
being a little more involved with Be
I'm trying
Perfect.
to think when the 5th event rolled around. I can't remember how long the Claremont location was open. Maybe we had been open about a year.
Okay.
I could be butchering this. I can't quite remember, but I had been immersed in the community for a while.
Right.
But
Right.
coming back up to Claremont and then being one of the 4 specialists, I was really in
Right.
the trenches with them. And so
Right.
then I was like, hey, I'd love to, be
Right.
more involved. And
So, your background in that, and then your passion for it and wanting to help, ultimately, what was that experience like? Because I'm thinking now that you're a therapist, right? And so I'm kind of imagining like you going through that beginning phase, working with the disability community, different forms of paralysis, knowing you now. I'm trying to connect, like, is that what inspired you to pursue a background in mental health, to wanting to provide more involvement, more support, or I'm trying to tie that together? Was that just not really a connection
No,
at the
well,
time? Or
maybe because I know once again your foundation and this podcast is really trying to highlight showing maybe young adults who are listening to this
right,
about paths and inspiring people to live
exactly,
out their
yeah,
dreams. So
right.
maybe let me tell the story from that
Go
perspective.
for it. Yeah, let's do that.
So, I feel for high school students
Right.
because you're expected, if you end up going to college, you're expected to pick your major. And that's the thing, like that's what you're doing for the rest of your life at the age of
Right.
18.
Right.
And so at the time, I was a high school athlete. I loved sports. All my friends were in sports. My whole life was revolved around sports. My dad was a college athlete. My dad's in the Hall of Fame at Chico State for
Nice.
soccer, so athletes were just a part of my life.
Right. Right.
And so, of course, I get into Chico State. I went to Chico State like my dad, and you have to declare your major. And I'm like, well, I hated school. I hated school for the most part. I was not good in math. English was fine. Didn't really interest me. I loved PE, but who doesn't love PE? I mean, that's just so stereotypical.
Right.
Who doesn't love PE?
Right.
And I just couldn't really find anything in high school that really inspired me to learn.
Got
And
it.
so I was like, well, I like athletes, so I guess I'll become a physical therapist. It's like classic
Right.
athlete high school student
Right.
wanting to stick with the athletes as long
Yeah.
as possible. So I go and I get my degree in exercise physiology. And so I think it was finding my passion, because when I started taking biology classes like human anatomy and human
Right.
physiology, I was like, this is cool. And it was like the first time ever that I felt inspired by school was in college. It was the first time ever that I actually feel like I felt smart.
I know what you mean.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like I finally connected to my learning.
Right.
And then on top of that, I think I've always been an empath. I've always been really empathetic to people. My mom would talk about I think from the beginning, my mom said I should have been a psychologist. She had been telling me for a long time,
Oh, really?
you should go into
Okay.
psychology. But I was like, no, I'm going to go work with athletes,
Yeah.
But I just naturally was always maybe a little bit of a caregiver for my friends, even as a
Got
little
it.
girl. That was
Right.
just kind of my role. And so, but then I find, human anatomy in the body, and I loved it. I felt smart for the first time. I was doing well on tests and exam, and I just loved what I was learning. And the bonus, I get to go help people with
Right.
the stuff that I
Exactly.
love doing, right? And so then graduate, from trying to figure it out, and knew that I wanted to eventually go into physical therapy school, but wasn't getting in right away. And so there was this kind of gap year, and that's when I moved to San Diego, got in running Motorola's Wellness Center, liked it. I got to teach Group X classes there, but it wasn't inspiring.
Right. It wasn't your calling.
No. And so then serendipitously, Hal's accident happened. Hal's going to Carlsbad. I walk into Carlsbad and I'm like, whoa,
wow.
like, what is happening in here? This is amazing. And this is your job. Like, you get to apply the principles that I learned in school.
Right.
But do this to these people who life had been flipped upside down, and everything's positive and hopeful. And it's just so cool.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of when the two worlds combined. And my love and passion for health sciences is really, what I loved learning about. And then the fact that I got to apply that knowledge and potentially make a difference in somebody's life. I mean, that was really appealing to me.
It was really like a direct connection. Like it all the pieces kind of fell into place in a sense,
Totally.
in so many ways. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so then switching to mental health.
Right. Okay.
If you've interfaced with this injury at all, you are interfaced with mental health, because grief is a huge part of acquiring, a spinal cord injury or paralysis. Humongous part of it. And then, of course, how it kind of rips people's identity away from them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's so much mental health wrapped up into this. So when I was a specialist and I was working physically hands-on with people, you can't help but be interfacing with the mental health.
Right.
And what I realized, I loved my job at The Perfect Step, and I loved what I did, and I felt passionate about it. But also I felt like my favorite part of my job was the mental health part. That I loved having those deep conversations with my clients. And then also at the same time, I was recognizing that nobody was talking about mental health in this community. And it was like blowing my mind, because some of my clients were like, really, I mean, now that I know what I know as a therapist, the conversations I were having with clients, I mean, I had clients who were suicidal right on my table.
I was going to ask.
Oh, absolutely. Suicidal, or were being neglected and abused by their caregivers, things that I would call mandator reports on now. That would be like a big no-no. I had no idea. But it was being told to me. I mean, serious mental health stuff going on.
Right.
And so to wrap it all up, that's when I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go back to school, and this is what I'm going to focus on. And I think I probably shouldn't say should. I think this was maybe my calling all along, like my mom had predicted, so she just saw that in me. But it's hard as an 18-year-old,
right?
Definitely. Trying to really know yourself and figure yourself out.
And going back to that too, right? Like high school, I feel like a lot of the conversation, me being a high school counselor, working directly with students who were having that conversation. You're about to graduate. What's the plan? What are we doing? What do you want to do? So many responses, different responses, and everyone's different. But some responses I hear, I don't know, which is okay. Military, cool. I don't want to go to college, so I'm just going to work. Right. Like all these responses are okay. Because a lot of time the message that's being pushed is you should have it figured out. Like you should have that plan in place, and you should know what you want to do. You should know what you want to study. To be quite honest, you don't know that until your bachelor's, when you've kind of learned more about, or even after. It doesn't even require school to really know that. So,
well, I want everybody to hear, I'm 36 years old, and I completely changed my career. I think I was just about to turn 30. I literally changed my career.
Right.
Because physical health and mental health, although they're in the health field, they are polar opposites of each other.
Right.
In terms of training and everything. I literally had
That's true.
This whole career, and I left it and went and did something it relates, but my job now is completely different
Right.
than anything I was ever doing.
Right.
And I did that at the age of 30. So like you're always going to be reinventing yourself.
Exactly. And it's okay to not have it figured out.
Yes.
You know, it's okay to take that time, and it's okay to ask questions and not, make mistakes, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of pressure on students to have it figured out and to have that perfect plan. And if I mess up, I'm a failure and I'm ruined, So
Also, I'm thinking about my own high school experience and how I felt about myself as a student. And I wasn't a bad student. I was a pretty good
right.
student, but I had friends who were excellent students and excellent athletes and just
Right.
kind of were the creme de la creme. And I just wasn't at that level. But I'm thinking about your job as a counselor and how significant your words are to these students. Because I remember, I went to Claremont High School, and Claremont High School, at least when I went there, really had, and I don't know how this narrative started, but I knew at Claremont High School, the 4 years that I was there,
Right.
that it was expected that I go to a 4-year college.
Right.
Not from my parents, but that's like what you did. And
Mm-hmm.
then there was also this undertone that was confirmed by what a teacher said on our first day of school, I think my junior year. There was this undertone that basically if you don't go to a university, so like I went to a Cal State,
Right.
if you don't go to like a university,
Right.
like a creme de la creme university,
Right.
then basically your education is like nothing.
Right.
And I remember there's this one teacher, I think he went to UCLA, really prided himself on that. I'm not really sure what the background was. He was not a teacher I obviously stopped connecting to when he said this.
Right.
But I remember at very first day of class, my junior year, he comes up in the front of the class and he spent the whole class, our first day lecturing, how important it was to go to USC or UCLA, and basically anything else
Are you
was
serious?
like whatever.
What?
And so I remember feeling so much, even though I was going to Chico State, like my dad went there, like my connection to him and my family has so much pride
Right.
around that school. My dad loved Chico State. He still
Right.
would go up there and visit
And he's a
friends.
Hall of Famer, you said, right?
Yeah,
He's in the Hall of Fame?
yeah, Hall of Fame for soccer up there. And so it was pride. My dad was proud that I was going to
Right.
Chico State.
As you should.
But I
Yeah.
remember feeling embarrassed to tell my
Wow.
friends' families or whatnot because I would be looked down upon to go to a
Right.
state school.
Right.
And so it's just your job and working with that high school age. I
Right.
mean, those conversations you're having,
Mhm.
they're pivotal for
Right.
people's trajectories of how they see themselves and what
Right.
they choose to do with their lives.
Right, definitely. And that's one message that I'm making sure that I communicate with the students, because like you mentioned, that pressure on going to a university, right? Prestigious one, a UC, right? Not a Cal State or community college. At the end of the day, it's like it might be a wise thing to look into a community college first and then transfer out, because those first 2 years, wherever you go, exactly, you're saving money. You're saving money, so many things. You're figuring it out in those first 2 years. You got to take gen eds anyways.
Well, it's interesting because my cousin, she went to a junior college, didn't do well in high school, thrived at junior college, went to Chaffey and Rancho Cucamonga, thrived there, loved the classes, loved her teachers, and ended up getting into Berkeley. And they invited
Oh,
her. She had all because she got such good grades and was
right,
doing so well
right,
in junior college
right,
that those universities like Berkeley and I think it was Penn State and a
right.
few other people reached out to her, invited her to apply to their schools. So
Wow.
kids, if you're listening and you don't got the grades in high
Mhm.
school right now, it doesn't. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't.
Right,
Go to a junior
exactly.
college. You can start fresh and you
Mhm.
can get good grades and still go
Yeah,
potentially your last 2 years at
exactly.
UCLA if you want.
Mhm.
Not that that's,
Exactly.
I probably want to go to UCLA. I would always go to Chico State. Never,
There you go.
yeah, I would never trade it in for
Right,
UCLA. My experience there, it was the perfect school for me.
right. No, definitely, I agree. And I think just communicating that message with the students and letting them know, do a lot of people like don't. I always tell them, don't do what your parents tell you to do. Do what you want to do. Right. At the end of the day, this plan, this future, what we're talking about is for you. A lot of times people think about what do my parents say, what are my friends doing, that type of thing. At the end of the day, let's figure out what you want to do. And I don't think people do that. And at least students that I'm working with today, a lot of them are really kind of on the fence when I kind of
Yeah.
challenge them in that
Right.
way. And I do that on purpose. because it's a lot of people following other people and not really thinking for
Yeah,
them all their
dude,
themselves.
it's rough being a teenager. And as somebody who
True.
works with teenagers too, but in a different capacity,
Right,
it's
right.
rough. And honestly, as somebody who also was a teenager and I mean, like,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
loved my college experience. I wouldn't do high school again. I do college again.
Yeah.
Where my husband would make me say the opposite. Loved high school.
Right,
I
right,
high school was yeah, it was okay for me.
right.
But you could not pay me enough money to go back and do high school again. I wouldn't do it. It's just such a rough time emotionally, developmentally,
Right. On every yeah.
socially. You're trying to figure out your
Mhm.
identity. It's the time in which you're
Right.
comparing your identity to your peers' identity and you're mirroring off of that and going, okay, people like them, but I'm not quite like that. So can I still be
Right.
likable? I mean, it's just, and then everybody's like, and where are you going to a 4-year college? And what are you going to do for the rest of your life? You better have it
Right.
figured out by 18. It's like, oh my God, their brains aren't fully formed till 24. So let's
Mhm.
cut everybody some slack.
Exactly.
You
No,
know?
yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so definitely just, another reminder to students and
Yeah.
people in general, maybe you have kids or whatever the situation is, right? At the end of the day, do what you love, what you're passionate about,
Yep.
have those conversations, it'll all fall into place on
Yeah.
your own. The people that you need as you're on your journey, they will come. So try not to put so much pressure on,
Yeah.
on yourself because at the end of the day, you can only do your best.
And guess what? You'll probably turn out to be 30 years old and start a new career anyway. So
Exactly.
it doesn't matter.
Exactly. So we talked about your high school experience. You went to Chico.
Yes.
Your dad's in Hall of Fame. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You brought some lovely medals today.
Well, you asked me to bring a cool object.
These are very cool.
And I
Might
was
I
like,
say?
I'm not really that cool of a person. So I didn't know what to bring. But
These
then I
are
was like, oh my
cool.
God, I dusted these off. Yeah. So these are my triathlon and half marathon medals.
Okay.
A few of them.
You said you were already active in sports in high school, so you continued.
This randomly fell into my lap. So I told you I graduated from Chico State. Then I moved down to San Diego. Part of that is that I spent a summer in San Diego and I knew I was going to move down there because I loved it.
I love San
But
Diego.
also at the time, my boyfriend was down in San Diego.
Okay.
And so I followed a boyfriend down to San Diego.
Uh-oh.
I want to be clear. I loved San Diego before. But
Yeah.
so I went down there, was living with boyfriend, but he had already had an established life down there
Okay.
and was a little bit older than me, had an established life down there, a career and friends. And I didn't. I was starting from scratch going
Right.
down there. And I
Right.
lived in Northern California, like way above Sacramento and going all the way to the opposite end of the
Wow. Literally.
California
Yeah.
state, right?
Yeah.
So I moved down there. And so at the time I had once again got my job at Motorola. And I was listening, this is so old school. I was listening to the radio driving to work, and there's an advertisement for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and they were so Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is a large nonprofit that raises money for research to help with different types of blood cancers and finding a cure. And one of the ways that they are famous for doing that is that they have what's called team in training. So you sign up to raise money, but they provide you a team of people that help you run your first half marathon. And you literally go through this whole with a team of other people who are raising money. So you have to raise a certain amount of money, but then you pick an event and then you get a whole team of people every weekend that you meet up with coaches, like professional running coaches. And they teach you literally from couch to finish line and get you across on your first half marathon or triathlon.
What is this? What is this called?
It's called Team in Training through Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
Okay. Wow.
And so I heard on the radio, and my dad had leukemia and passed away from that. And so the whole little connection, and I was like, oh, well, that will be good. That will be a good cause.
Right.
Connected to something that's personable for me.
Of course.
And then, yeah, that sounds cool. Maybe I'll make friends. And so I signed up for my first half marathon through them, raised money to do it. And then that's the San Diego culture, though, is that everybody's really outdoorsy. So the social thing to do in San Diego is to actually be in triathlon clubs,
events.
Running clubs, or paddleboarding clubs, or whatever, you name it. There's a million.
Yeah, because there's so many things to do out there.
That's what 20-year-olds do down there. Like normally, like 20-year-olds might be like clubbing and partying. And don't get me wrong, that was a part of like San Diego. Oh, is it up here?
Okay.
Yes. Yep. So they have. I mean, it's expanded since I was doing.
It's
This
still,
was back in 2007 through 2000. No, I'm so sorry. I was in college then. This was 2011 through 2015, 16, I think I was doing this. I
Okay.
can't quite remember.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's super, super cool. So if you are really like, I've never run more than a mile and you're interested, this is a really great way to get into endurance training because they provide you with the coaches and the
That's
mentorship to
very
be
cool.
successful.
Yeah,
Super, super cool. And it's obviously for a great cause.
of course. Okay, so
Um,
that's
so
that's
then
what.
that threw me into
Mhm.
this community. That's where I made all my friends. And so then for years afterwards, that's what I did socially on the weekends.
You're
We go out and do these long multi-hour runs or
Wow.
rides or swims. And then we go grab a beer afterwards. And that's like what you did socially. And
Wow.
so I did that all the way up until I moved to Claremont to open up the first Perfect
Oh,
Step
wow,
and
okay.
finished up, which was
Very
this one, the
cool.
Challenge Athletes Foundation,
And these are
was
all
the
in
last
San
one I did.
Diego.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff I did in San Diego. So Lava Man was actually in Hawaii. So that was my first triathlon I ever did. And it was with Team in Training. And they trained me how to do swim, bike, run. And we flew out, shipped my bike out there and everything, flew out to
Oh,
Hawaii and
wow.
did a course called Lava Man on Hawaii for the triathlon. This was in Riverside, the Citrus Heritage Run. And then we have what was this? This was, another San Diego run, 10 miles with 20 bands. So at every mile, there was a band playing music. San Diego
Okay.
Triathlon Classics, one of the very popular ones down there. And I'm trying
These
to
are all very well designed as well. I like them. They look cool.
really cool and special.
It does. Even the lanyard itself is really awesome.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's just a little about me. So that's what I did. I do nothing nowhere near this anymore, but that's what I did through
I
basically
appreciate.
my whole entire 20s.
Wow, that must have been exhausting.
You know what? When you are, well, I eventually broke up with that boyfriend. When you are single and in your 20s and all I had to worry about was showing up for work and
Right,
paying my bills,
right.
training for a triathlon was
The way to go.
manageable.
Right,
But now that I'm a mom and running my own private practice,
right. How things have changed. Right, you're not doing triathlons.
heck no.
Would you mind showing the medals to the camera?
Yeah,
So
this
people can
one
check
right
it out. Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
so
look close
here's
up.
one of the last one I ever did, the longest one. This was basically what's called a half Ironman distance. So it was a 1.5-mile swim, just under 50-mile bike ride, and then a 10-mile run
How do you train for that?
every freaking day,
Oh
multiple
my
hours
God.
a day.
And do you
Yeah.
do all the different things within the
Yeah,
training too?
so the training program's kind of like, and it depends on the distance and the type of race. So that's considered a long distance, whereas
Right.
San Diego Triathlon Classic is an Olympic distance. So Olympic athletes do this distance, which is a
Oh,
mile swim. I think it's a 10-mile bike ride and a 5-mile run. Oh, see, I've even forgotten. Oh, here we go. 1.5K swim, 40K bike, 10K run.
the training that goes into triathlons, is that what's that structure like? Are you aiming for certain times? Are you aiming just to finish? How do you even?
I'm a Joe Schmo, so if I can just finish.
Okay, that's what I would feel
Well,
like.
at first you just start by like, can I just do this?
Yeah,
stupid
let me
thing,
just
right?
try it.
Yeah, let me
Yeah.
just try doing this stupid thing.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, you get into it and then you want to beat your time. So a lot of times you'll revisit races because it's like on that particular course, I got that particular time because all courses are
Oh,
different.
okay.
They're not
Yeah.
equal, right?
Right,
So
right.
some courses people will say like, oh, that's a fast course, meaning that it's probably like not a lot of hills, pretty
Right.
flat, and you can
Right.
get through it pretty quickly.
Mm,
And so, but yeah, you'll try to PR, get your best time. That's the
Right.
goal. Or people will increase their distance. So the Olympic one, the distance that I did was only half of the half Ironman distance that I did. So
Oh.
I doubled the distance training for this one.
Was that the very next one you said that was the last
No, this
one,
was
but
the last one I've
Okay.
ever did. This is when I retired.
that's when you're like, I'm done.
I was like,
that caused you to retire.
Yeah, this was in 2014. I was the last one I did.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, 10 years ago.
Was it because of that event, or was it just like you were already kind of thinking of?
I think, I had moved back up from San Diego to Claremont, and it
Okay,
was not the social scene for 20-year-olds up in the Inland Empire. It was more of a San Diego thing. And so I
Right.
was training by myself every week. And when you're training for something like that, you're out when you're doing a long run or a long ride, you're
Right.
out for like 2 to 6 hours
Right.
training on a Saturday.
nonstop.
And then I was doing it by myself.
Oh,
It just
yeah.
wasn't fun anymore. Where in San Diego, I was doing it with a group of people. So
Right,
it was very
right.
social.
There's a community there for that.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let me, I think you deserve a little round of applause for all those extra.
That was like a lifetime ago. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did
I
that.
still have football trophies
Oh,
and
yes.
medals,
Yes,
and
yes.
my mom has a whole corner dedicated to that of ours. Yeah. So every now and then I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Cool.
Yeah.
At one point in time, I was cool.
Yeah. So I definitely reflect on that too. So yeah, very cool. Okay. I had no idea that you ran triathlons about you. So
Fun fact.
very cool.
Something new about me today.
Before we transition to our next segment, I want to take a moment to introduce you to one of our amazing sponsors. If you're looking to elevate your next event with homemade deliciousness that leaves your guest raving, look no further than Mom's Cocina. At Mom's Cocina, we're not just about food, we're about creating unforgettable experiences. Whether you're planning an intimate dinner party, a corporate luncheon, or a milestone celebration, our team at Mom's Cocina is dedicated to crafting an experience to your unique taste and preferences. What sets Mom's Cocina apart isn't just our food, it's our personalized approach to every single event. And the best part, Mom's Cocina handles everything from start to finish, allowing you to relax and enjoy your event without worrying about a thing. We do have a short clip to promote Mom's Cocina while that's getting loaded. You've had some food from, I know Mom's Cocina, we came to the Be Perfect or to the Perfect Step grand opening. Did you get a chance to try?
Hey, Mom's Cocina, thank you so much for catering my daughter's quinceañera. My guests had a really good time. They really enjoyed the food. I just want to say that your staff and the overall service that I got from you is fantastic. And I will definitely be recommending you again to my friends and family. Everybody is really happy with the food. And thank you so much for doing that.
Hey, it cannot be more aptly named. Mom's Cocina brings that food that I remember from my abuelita and my mom. It was great customer service, great food. Everything went out without a hit. They were super fast. Our fault, we came in late, and they got to us. They got us everything we needed. Highly recommend these guys. Take care, guys.
I highly recommend. Great service. Beans and rice, I'm so picky, but it was delicious.
Yeah, their service is amazing. The attention to detail. They were there checking what we needed. They got plates for our family who we were waiting on. So they were great. 100% recommend.
Thank you.
That's cool.
Thank you to Mom's Cocina for supporting our podcast. You can book and learn more about Mom's Cocina at momscocinacatering.com or visit them on their social media on Instagram and Facebook at Mom's Cocina Catering. So yeah, you had some Mom's Cocina at the event, right? Bomb, right?
And I love the logo.
Yeah, actually, what I did was to create her logo. For people who don't know, Mom's Cocina, Mom's Cocina, the mom, that's my mom. So shout out to my mama. I basically provided a picture of her and they were able to convert it to like a cartoon.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, wow, that actually looks really good. And she was literally doing that pose like that in the photo. So they came up with that and I think it came out pretty good.
Yeah. Well, she's like the nicest lady ever.
She is, right?
She's great and very hospitable. And yeah, so great little person to hire.
Exactly.
Some good food.
Exactly. One thing I wanted to dive into, I'm interested in knowing how the power of storytelling in your practice, is that implemented within your practice? Do you ever, how does storytelling or stories play a role in working with clients or maybe, in healing in general or your perspective with that?
Well, I love, just like you, I'm a gabber. I like to talk and I love to tell. And I, my family's Italian, and so we love to tell stories.
There you go.
With stories. So I wish I could do it more, but the nature of my job is that I have to protect people's confidentiality. So I don't really get to tell stories like I wish I did. But within the confines of my sessions with my clients, maybe one of my clients will be going through something that's really similar to another client. And I
Right,
will maybe
right.
give an example with obviously not giving detail,
Yes,
but say
of
my client
course.
was in the same position and they tried A, B, C, and D. Like, does that sound like that resonates with you?
Right, right.
But that's why I like coming on these podcasts, because I think obviously people's privacy and protection around their trauma is really important, but there's so many powerful conversations that I'm having with clients that I think a lot of people would really benefit from hearing. And
Right.
so I do love coming on podcasts because it gives me the ability to maybe share themes of those stories with the broader community that hopefully will be helpful, because I know there's so many conversations where I'm like, man, if this could just be recorded and just like put out there. Obviously, I'm
Right.
not trying to abuse people's
No,
trauma
of
right out
course,
there, right?
of course.
But like, it's just what my clients have to say and what they think about, and it's so powerful. So I wish I could do it more, but I don't really
Right.
get to do it so often in my practice.
Right, and that makes sense, right? Given the profession and the confidentiality behind that, but just adding to that too, like the storytelling piece, right? Like I can use myself. I don't mind using myself as an example. I tell people that all the time. I'm very comfortable with that. I used to be like, initially when I first got injured, I was very, like maybe a lot of stories you've heard, just very confined to my safe space, right? And that for me was my house inside my home, and never leaving, and never wanted to leave, and never wanted to be seen. And I'm talking about like the first 2 years of my injury. And I'm just sharing this to highlight more to what you're talking about, right? From just a real perspective for people who may be wondering or kind of curious to know, well, what is she talking about? I'm just giving that example.
Right.
So yeah, within the first 2 years after I got injured, right, really just being in that mindset where like literally my life changed, right? Literally had to learn how to live all over again, from bathing, restroom, sleeping, my sleep routine, eating, dressing, transportation, entering and exiting buildings that may not be accessible, because early on I was already facing that just from places I've gone. And then the social piece, right? So all of that, how do you leave that? How do you get out of that? Right. So, and that took time.
Yep.
And then eventually I started to realize that I have a story, right? I have a purpose. I have a story. I have something to say. I do matter. I can do this. I am capable of this. I do deserve this, right? So that conversation started to change with myself through reflection, through lots of reflection and some conversations with other people.
Well, what's really nice is that people don't have to be paralyzed to be able to relate to your story or to get something from it, because what your story really is about is tragedy and loss,
Right.
which all of us at some point in our life, once or multiple times, are going to be touched by tragedy and loss. It's just like
exactly.
the innate part of being a human.
Right.
Or go through really tough times where you're questioning your existence,
Right.
And so anybody can relate to that. Now, obviously, you're telling it through the lens of the paralysis, but you're just speaking to the human condition.
Exactly.
And so it is, I think, art, movies, music, this is all people's human storytelling.
Right. And that's one of the components when I speak, wherever I go, I speak and share my story from obviously my experience living with paralysis. However, I use that to apply that it can be applied to everyone, right? We all have a story. We all have something to say. We all are going through things. We all struggle.
Right.
So how are we gonna respond to that?
Right.
What do we do in those situations?
Well, I'm hearing that also sharing your story was liberating, because now you get to take a tragedy and basically turn it into something bigger and more positive than what the tragedy was.
Right.
And so it is really important to share your story. But I also think too, there's a lot of pressure on, and I don't know if you felt this way. Obviously, I think this is natural to your personality. It makes sense that you would do all of this, right? Like, I just feel like this is Miguel really living out his dreams and passion.
Right.
But I also think too, when people go through tragedy, especially in the paralysis community, they feel maybe pressure to now all of a sudden have to make their life revolve around the injury.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's like,
Oh, yeah.
now I need to be a speaker about
Right.
this injury, or I need to be a public speaker about this, or now, I love that you became a school counselor, and your Dream Big Project Foundation is not, obviously it's focusing on, people who might have disabilities,
Right.
but it's focusing on youth.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with paralysis. And I love that, because I think there's so much pressure that the only job for people coming out of this injury is to have to go do something with disability. And it's like, no,
Exactly.
you don't need to do that. And share your story because it liberates you. Tell your story because it feels good to you. But you're not required to stay in the hub of now being the spokesperson for people with disabilities.
Right.
Go out, go do something completely different.
Right.
And just let it be like a piece of clothing that you wear.
Right.
You live your life in a chair. It just is what it is.
Right. It is what it is. Do you happen to come across clients who feel like they have to be like a spokesperson or play a certain role, or maybe not even clients, but
just
people in general?
I think, so obviously when somebody gets injured, and I'm just talking about our little Inland Empire community, the Perfect Step community, they see Hal Hargrave Jr., who made a nonprofit for the paralysis community because he saw a gaping hole and wanted to fill a need. And so they see him, and he's doing all these wonderful things for the community that they've entered into. And I think people, and he's not doing this on purpose, he's just trying to help people out. But I think people see him, and he is successful, but he looks successful. And they're like, how do I make my world that feels so isolated and so small and so awful? How do I make it look and feel like that? And that's not the point of what Hal's doing, right? The point is that, hey, this was my journey. And he would probably say this is part of his spiritual journey. This was maybe God's plan for him, is maybe what he would say about this, right? Not trying to speak for him or anything, but this was his journey, and he gets joy and pleasure out of creating opportunity for you to go out and go on your spiritual journey. Right. And you don't, and so I think people are like, oh, I can't do anything but be disabled, so I guess I have to talk about being disabled, or like I have to do something with the disabled community. And it's like, no, whatever you were dreaming before. Obviously there's certain people, I have a handful of people who their job uniquely required them to have to use their hands. There's no way to get around it. Even with the adaptable equipment that we have, I can think of 3 clients off the top of my head that their jobs uniquely required the fine motor movement, and now they're quadriplegics. And there's just no way they can go back into those jobs. No, and I come from the Perfect Step. You give me a random piece of equipment, I can tie that up and put it together and make it work for you, right?
Exactly.
But there is, for these particular 3 clients, there's just no way. No way they can go back to that job. So they literally went from a job that they loved and were passionate about, and now they're like, well, what the heck? Do I do now? And so it's fighting that thing. Get away from if you don't want to, you don't be in the disability community because it benefits you, but you don't have to do this.
Exactly. You don't. And I feel like too, I've never been, even when I was injured, I didn't really know a lot about the disability community. I never really wanted to be a representative of the disability community. But once I did enroll or sign up at Project Walk at the time, which is now the Perfect Step, that's when I started to find the disability community and connect and learn and find more resources, right? Because I will say, if I'm disabled, so not knowing that community, not having a connection to the community was more of I wonder if there's anyone else, who is going through what I'm going through, feeling what I'm feeling, which is, Yeah. You don't have to have a disability to feel those things. And, but when I did get connected to Perfect Step, it did feel better, right? Of there's other people who look like me and have same goals or similar goals, and we're going after it, right? Like that really kind of reinstilled that hope, and just that little bit of hope was enough for me to be like, okay, let's do this, you know. Because prior to getting connected to the perfect step, it was, you know, a dark, scary place, lonely, right? Especially because there was no reference to disability, and no one in my family or anyone in my immediate surrounding had a disability or knew about it, so I felt really alone on that. So connecting to the community did help. In case there is anyone out there, right, with the disability, not that it's the disability community that you have to connect to, but for me, I can speak that I did get a lot of value from that. And that was really kind of opened up a lot more, you know? Absolutely. So I really do appreciate just, you know, how we're talking about how and be perfect and the perfect step. So if there's, you know, if you do have a disability and you're looking for a group or, you know, a purpose or whatever it may be, you know, there is support out there. You know, there are resources out there, right? So many resources.
Well, it's just the classic mental health stereotype. Everybody thinks they're alone in their problems.
Right.
And now as a therapist who talks to people 6 hours a day, 5 days a week for years on end, I can tell you and promise you that whatever you think you're going through that is so big, so tremendous, or so weird, or so odd, somebody else absolutely is also going through it.
Right.
So you really aren't alone, and the community is there for resources.
Right.
And that's why else have a community?
Exactly. That reminds me too, when you're saying like, we're not alone. When a lot of time, I'm trying to think of a specific example that came up recently, but I just remember my response to it was, you know, where a person didn't believe that, like, what am I going to do in this situation, right? Like, I don't know what to do, or I'm stuck, or how is this going to work out? Like, am I going to be able to do this? Right. And then, you know, right away, it was interesting because I thought, well, and then my response to that was, do you think anyone else have gone through this experience before? And they were like, yeah. Well, so then we know it's possible to get through this. Right. Someone has gotten through this before. Yeah,
well, it's the same thing when my clients come in. They're like, you know, they're quadriplegic, like you are, and they come in, they're like, I can't drive. There's no way I'm going to be able to drive. And I'm like, and right across the street, it's Hal and you driving your big old trucks, you know? And I'm sitting here going, help me understand how you come to that conclusion. Right. Like, I don't, but I think also too that, you know, that's the denial piece, right? Like, to dream that you can still live a big full life after a disability also requires you to accept that you have a disability.
Yes.
And
preach.
A lot of people don't want to do that.
Yeah. No, that literally. You know, I understand it. Right. No, it's literally like, you know, one of the first steps, if not the first step, right, of accepting.
Yes.
Right. And I can tell you firsthand, you know, until you accept it, you will eventually embrace it, and you will eventually move on and do amazing things. But you have to accept it, and you have to let that go.
With everything.
You know?
Everything. Every part of your life. You have to accept it to move forward.
Right. You have to. That's so true. So one thing I want to, sticking to that theme of recovery, of acceptance, being alone, but at the same time having family around you, right? Because for me, and maybe others can relate, you know, I got injured. I have an awesome family, very supportive. At the same time, still a little ignorant on disability, you know, and, you know, even to this day. So it was very foreign, right, for us, you know. I was interested in knowing, like, in your experience and expertise, as a marriage and family therapist, or maybe working in groups or with families, or even just that conversation with someone individually, any like effective strategies for supporting families through a crisis, like or an injury or a diagnosis? Like, has there ever been a case where you've gotten the family involved, or, you know, in that sense, or has it been more individual and talking about it in that way? Anything effective along those lines?
Yeah, well, that's a huge topic,
right,
that we probably could spend an hour on.
And
So I'll try to maybe answer kind of the point or the question that you're trying to get answered here, which is, yes, when somebody goes through a life-altering situation like acquiring a disability, which is now changing the way that you live your life and how you live your life, and obviously, especially up front, it requires other people to be involved. This changes the whole family. So it's not just you going through the injury. I know you know this.
Right.
I'm not lecturing.
No. Yeah.
It's not just you going through the injury. It's your whole family going through the injury.
Right.
People who were just regular moms and dads all of a sudden are now caregivers overnight. And so it is a whole mental health for the whole family. Now, if I had my way as a therapist,
right,
I would have, and which I do. For some of my clients, I'm literally seeing the person with the disability by themselves. I'm seeing the mother or father or spouse as the caregiver by themselves. And then I see them conjointly as family. So if I had my way, all families would have that type of support.
Right.
But at a broader scope, up front, the caregiving job, and you and I talked about this last podcast, that as people get time's your friend. As you get further into the years of your disability, you learn more, you figure out more, you become more independent. So the caregiving is really heavy up front and usually starts to really be fine-tuned, tweaked, or lessons on the back end.
Right. Oh, and
I'm sure you can speak to that, right?
Definitely.
Like, I mean, thinking about your injury up front, I mean, your parents were probably around the clock.
Right. Oh, yeah.
How often?
Yeah, exactly.
Just the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Just those simple, though, even within those times that there is a need there, it's like a quick compared to what it was before. Right. Like, all right, let's do this. Boom, boom. All right, cool. And we're good. You know? Yep. So compared to before where it was like feeding, you know, I remember being in my manual chair because I have a power chair and a manual chair. I use both for different purposes. I remember being in my power chair for the first time and literally not being able to push like from here to there. And I was like, how am I going to do this? What? You know?
We now understand why people feel pretty hopeless up front in the injury, because it's like you said, I can't eat it. I'm sweating bullets pushing maybe a half a foot.
Right.
Like, how am I supposed to go back out into the world?
Exactly. Right. And then, so that's the type of support I needed, right? I couldn't even do that physically. So I needed literally support from beginning to end. And exactly. And then getting to that point eventually where, okay, I feel good about starting things, like I'm fast forwarding now, and then going back to school. Because even then it was scary and it just kind of came up. That's why I brought it up. But I remember thinking like, I want to go to school. I want to do it. How am I going to navigate the space, the school itself, getting one class to the next? How am I going to do that? Like, that was a question I was thinking, like, how am I going to do that? And then you know what the response was? I'll figure it out.
And look at you. You did.
I'll figure it out. Right. Now I'm on I work at the school now. Like, you know, so that's like the short version of what can be the outcome if we continue to try, push ourselves. And
to wrap up the little caregiver part, if we lived in a perfect world, I would emphasize that the community or people who maybe aren't directly doing the day-to-day caregiving, that a lot of focus goes to the injured person or the disabled person, rightfully so.
Right.
But I would say if somebody, let's say you're a family member just got a spinal cord injury, they're currently sitting in the hospital doing inpatient.
Right.
And now that person's loved ones or parents are now being taught in the hospital how to be a caregiver.
Right.
If I had a megaphone and I was speaking to their community or additional support systems that they have in their life, ideally if they don't have support systems, it becomes more complicated. But if they just have some other people surrounding them, I would say focus on the caregiver. Period.
Right.
Don't worry. The caregiver is going to take care of the person.
That's
Focus
so true.
on the caregiver, because the caregiver is the beating heart of your ability to be able to be where you're at today.
Right. That's true.
If that went sideways up front when you initially got injured, things would probably be looking really different for you.
Completely different.
And so support the caregiver. And caregivers are one of the most important healthcare jobs on this planet. And not only are they significantly underpaid, but they are completely neglected. And they're the ones who are in the trenches with you, unlike doctors and nurses. And nurses are in the trenches while you're in a hospital.
Right.
But caregivers are in the trenches 24/7.
Yeah.
So supporting the caregiver's well-being, asking them, what do you need? Not asking you.
Right.
Asking the caregiver, what do you need? How can I support you? Can I make you a meal?
Right.
Here, I'll sit and watch. I mean, it's like having sometimes maybe even a new baby. I'll sit and watch and I'll hang out with, and you go take a shower.
Right.
Because if the caregiver becomes burnout, which happens 95% of the time, they become abusive and neglectful caregivers.
Right.
And that becomes very dangerous to the person who's receiving the care.
Right.
So our caregivers have one of the most important jobs in the world, making sure that you get to be successful.
That's so true.
And if they are neglected in any way, shape, or form, it's gonna make the whole thing implode.
And that's a great point. To add to that too, that's one of the reasons why two things come to mind. And right away I'm thinking of when I met my girlfriend currently, my current girlfriend. Shout out to Denise.
I have so many questions, but go ahead. Finish.
So she's awesome, by the way, right? I adore her. She's awesome. So shout out to her. But anyway, so the reason why I connected the two is because me, one thing about disability dating, right? Even before I started seeing her, I've been in previous relationship, but that was a while back. But it's always like, would I find someone that can connect with me, that would accept me, right? I know, I know what I'm involved in currently, but I'm just talking more in the sense of like a relationship, right? Like, can I have that intimate relationship with someone and really be happy? And one thing I noticed differently for me and going into a relationship is I'm not going to say need, I'm going to say want to be obviously the best version of myself. I mean, we all want this, the best version of myself, but more specifically, I want to speak to like the disability and being in a relationship and navigating that and knowing how to support one another.
Right.
So one thing I do differently now is I always make sure I communicate like, hey, this is what this looks like, and this is how I do this. And you can support me with this, right? Like being very clear on that, on how, why this is important, how we can go about this. And at the same time, what I think I add now is like, I do this way, and I want to do this for me as much as possible, whatever this is. Because I know I need certain things and help, but at the same time, I can do a lot on my own, and I don't want to put a lot on you, because I know, exactly. And I know what that can do as far as like having a caregiver that's 24/7, right? Because they're also speaking to like, what, for example, I've experienced also, just to add, I've gained a certain amount of independence back, and I can do a lot more on my own through that whole recovery and this journey. But there's still those times where, family and people who care about you want to help you. And it's like, oh, like, I'm okay. Like, I can do these things. Yeah. So I've kind of tried to separate that. And also, I think it's important that we have that communication for a person with a disability in a relationship to talk about those things and what's the best way we can support each other.
Well, yeah, you're giving confidence to think about that, because there's a lot of people with disabilities or who are new to disability, should I say, that I hear it in my office all the time. They already feel like a burden, up front, because holy cow, man, it is. It's a big wide load to carry initially when you first get injured, right? But they also feel like they can't say anything including being directive, or don't even think to be directive or like grab the reins because they feel like I've been so burdensome. I'm just going to be quiet here in the corner and make sure I just don't say or do anything else extra to like set this person off or overload them or whatever. But what you're speaking to is that there is an ownership of your disability that it's not required of you, but gosh, it would make your life a lot easier. And if you do that and you take ownership of it, and then you learn how to streamline those things that you are trying to do independently, then it's just a simple instruction that you give to somebody versus somebody else having to figure it out for you. You need to, essentially you figure it out for yourself. And then you instruct people, because really disabilities, yes, there's a lot that goes into, just like kids, it's having a kid is a change of life. There's a lot that goes into it, but all in the same breath, if you can figure out your life and take ownership of it and mainstream it, being with somebody with a disability can be complicated, but it's not that complicated because you're already like, yeah, look, I got to do this thing this way, but let me tell you how it's done. And here are the parts in which you can be a part of it, versus somebody being like, okay, I, the caregiver, am responsible completely to figure this out for you. And I think that gets really confused in people's caregiving patient romantic or not romantic relationship is that the person with the disability is not empowered to figure it out for themselves. And when they figure it out, then they're empowered to just apply simple instruction. And then the other person's like, cool, I didn't have to put any brain power on that. I just know that when you're eating, you need me to slide the fork in between, or grab the fork for you, or cut the steak for you. And that's it. And they don't have to put extra mental power or energy into it. And I think that's where sometimes people get confused. Is that they think they need to be quiet, but it's like quite the opposite. No, you need to go and be boisterous and take the reins and go take control of your life again.
There's so much value in doing that for yourself as an individual, for the family, for that relationship dynamic. Like there's so much value in owning that, communicating that, because it allows you to just move on and enjoy your life and do what you have to do.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because I think I know some of my clients need to hear this.
Okay.
Because it needs to. But here, so you have a girlfriend now.
I do. Shout out to Denise. Be nice.
Shout out to Denise. You're the best. You have a girlfriend now. You are not a paraplegic. You're a quadriplegic.
I'm a quad.
And not to downplay paraplegics, but they do, and they'll admit they have an advantage over being able to have the use of their hands. Right. So you are a full C5, C6. Am I right with that?
Yeah, you're correct.
I can tell. C5, C6, spinal cord injury.
Okay.
And so it's as spinal cord injury-ish as you can get. It's a little bit higher. We have our power chair friends. But it's pretty up there on the disability scale of paralysis.
Yes. It's like a little bit of everything.
I'm not trying to be, I'm kind of trying to be, I'm not gonna lie, I am being dramatic here. But I want people to understand that you are in the full trenches of disability.
Correct.
There is no sugarcoat in it. Okay. And now you have a girlfriend.
She's amazing.
What is, for her, what do you believe to be the hardest adjustment for her in being in a relationship with you as somebody with a disability?
The hardest adjustment for her?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
And you're just going to take a guess. Obviously, if she was here, I'd love for her to answer that. But let me back up why I'm asking this. People like you, they're young men, injured, are so scared to go out and date because of the burden that they think that they would place on a loved one. And yeah, there are burdensome parts of this injury. And so obviously you're well through the acceptance phase of your injury. You are living your big, amazing life. But obviously I'm assuming this is new to her.
Yeah.
I'm guessing she's never been in a relationship with somebody who has this level of disability. So I'm just so curious, what actually are the challenges for her? Has she voiced them? Would you know what those would be? Can you tell when you're doing something where you're like, oh, this is tough for her?
So that's a great question, and I'll answer that. So two things come to mind right away.
Okay.
One is
the real. I want to hear the real.
So one is, and I always have a tough time believing this. And about this answer I'm going to give, I always have a tough time. Like, okay, but it's I mean, it's what it is. So she's like, I don't see you for your chair. Like, I see you for you as a person. Like, your personality is what I love about you.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I am awesome. Okay, cool. And so so I'm like, okay, like that tells me she's open and going to this like openly and not judging me based on my appearance or my chair or my disability.
Right.
That's kind of how I take it. Right. And I always like brought it up, but she's like, she always reminds me of that. Right. Not always brings it up, but when it does come up, she reminds me of that. Right. And that's what makes me believe that 100%. Right. Now, the adjustment thing that I see, it's really about learning she wants to learn how to best support me as much as possible. And I think a lot of this goes into her as a person and her spirit, very empathetic, very compassionate, very giving, right? So I would say it kind of maybe it's a personality. Right, exactly. So she naturally is like learning how to best support me and also not expecting, but waiting for me to show her how to go about certain things, because she's naturally someone who's like, oh, let me do this. Let me help you with this. Let me help you with that. So that's why I found value in communicating and owning up to my things, my disability and my needs, and communicating that with her, because she's like, oh, okay, yeah, like, I can do that. Like, oh yeah, okay, cool, let's do that. So that's an adjustment within our relationship. I think intimacy is like an adjustment for the both of us. It's not just for her. Right. It's also for me too. Right. So that is a whole different area. Yep. Right. So the adjustments of intimacy, the adjustment of how can I best support you, and me communicating that with her and not letting her need to figure out what to do. Right. That's kind of all in that. So
is there anything that scares her? Like, well, you guys don't live together yet.
Right. So we've gone, yeah.
And so I'm wondering, like, if you have a concern that eventually if you move into that next phase and you guys live together, are you like, okay, this is going to be the time when she bows out? Or like, what are some of those things?
That's a great question too. Yeah. And I think
I talk about this a lot.
I like that we're talking about this, because these are conversations I need to be had on everywhere, so we've gone on trips together. We went up to Cambria recently, up north, for her birthday weekend. It was really cool. I love it up there, actually. That's a whole conversation. But so we she has a 2-year-old son, so we went as a family and enjoyed that weekend. So it was a really family dynamic with her 2-year-old son. Right. So I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome, Okay, so I'm thinking like my routines, right? And her 2-year-old son, and like us, exactly. He has his routines, and to me, I'm putting him. He needs to be taken care of, right? Obviously, and I'm gonna figure out my routine, and it's interesting. I can't wait to talk about this. It's funny. It is funny because for me. So, right, we're talking about routines and mine, his, hers, ours, right? Just the morning, Actually, let's start with the night, because we get there around 5 or 4. We check in, and right away, and it's already late. It's raining because we're driving through the storm. That was a weekend where it was raining hard. Yeah, and it was Friday, so it hit up north before Saturday was supposed to hit here. So we get there, and I'm thinking like, okay, and I'm already thinking this before the trip, right? And I'm pretty sure I talked to her about this, but in case yeah, I know, right? So I'm thinking like, all right, my night routine, all right, shower, roll-in shower, all right. So I'm thinking shower, restroom, transferring bed, all that, right? All my transitions, all those things. And then, first of all, we get to this hotel in Cambria, and it's claimed to be an ADA accessible
That's
room.
what they always say.
And
Lift going in.
we get to the door, and then she walks in. She because it's raining, she gets in, and I get out the truck and I approach the door, and right away I'm like, "There's a step here."
It's just so classic. Like, why can't we get this right?
I'm like, there's clearly a step into the room. Into the room. This is the doorway, the entrance. And this is the only ADA room. And it says ADA. Like, we could, it says ADA. And right away, I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you serious? It's raining out here. It's Friday night. The beginning of a really awesome trip that we were looking forward to. And one of my main things our main things, and was like, hey, let's just make sure we get an ADA room. Because that's vital,
right?
Right. And so, step right there. And right away, I'm like, I'm not going to let this take over me. Like, I really learned to check in with myself during those moments, because I can easily just,
flip it. Right.
But I'm like, I'm not going to let this ruin this moment, this trip, or nothing. Because easily could have.
Right.
And so I was like, what do we do? What do I do? It's raining. And I'm like, all right, right away I'm thinking, how do we make it a ramp? Like how do we
makeshift ramp.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Makeshift ramp. I'm like, boom. All right. And I told her, go get 2 towels. There's a mat here, a mat, right? Like a doormat.
Yeah.
Go get 2 towels in the restroom, roll up those towels, put them underneath at the edge of the step into the room, lay the mat over the towels, and that's a ramp that will hopefully work. A makeshift ramp that will hold my power chair that's 300 pounds with me on top of it.
It's just so classic.
So I have the video of it, but I don't think it's on. I didn't put it anywhere, but I recorded it and it worked. That's how I literally got in and out of the room that weekend.
With towels and just a little old mat.
And a little old mat. That's all you need. Make sure you carry 2 towels and a mat with you. Everywhere you go. That's an extra bag for you. So anyways, that's the first thing that happens, right? So that's about 5, 6 o'clock. We eat. And then I'm like, his routine is going to bed around 8 o'clock. And so, he's just exploring the room, and he's having a grand old time. Right. We're kind of closing this door, closing this, moving these things out of the way so he doesn't get to these things. And so it gets to the point where it's, all right, you know what? He had a lot of energy. Awesome. We've gotten to that point where he comes to me, grabs my hand, and wants to show me things, which is really cool. Yeah. So I think that's awesome. So anyways, I'm like, okay, it's already 8 o'clock. It's been a long day. He's still up. He's not napping. You know what? I'm in a shower. I want to take a shower.
Right.
And then so the shower, thankfully, was a roll-in shower. They had a, ramp. I'm not a ramp, shower chair connected to the wall. And then I go into the shower and I'm like, you know what? And so typically my routine, I always get support, like depending on the shower chair and the whole thing. I can either get support, get help, like kind of transferred in or whatever, right? But I usually have someone assist me getting into the shower chair.
Right.
So I go into the shower and I'm like, okay, it's pretty flat. There's room. I can navigate. I'm like, excuse me, I think I'm good here.
Right.
Excuse me. I think I'm good here. I think I can do this. Yeah. I think I can transfer and do all this because I'm always looking for, if I can do it, I'm gonna try it. Let's do it. But I'm always looking for that new form of independence. Right. Like that's always like my goal, just to get as much as possible. And I'm like, all right, get my shower stuff ready. Luckily, the restroom is pretty ADA, so it's pretty good, on point. I appreciated that. The bed is like yay high. which is not ADA. So anyways, that's a whole different thing. So I get my stuff and then she's with her son and I'm in the shower. So usually this is new to me. So I'm like, I'm going to do this. So I get my board. I figured I'm literally spending 2 hours trying. My whole shower was 2 hours long. Transferring, getting everything set up where I can reach so I can be successful just with the shower and doing it all on my own. I'm talking about undressing in my chair. I'm talking about transferring, putting the board, because I still use the transfer board in that situation, getting into the shower chair, making sure I don't fall, making sure my towels and everything's in place for me to use, turning on the shower, making sure I'm not burning hot or cold, all of that. That alone was like an hour.
Oh, at least.
And then shower, and so, yeah, it was like, I try to make it quick as possible because even then I only have so much space. So it was like, I don't know, 20 minutes, a solid. I just enjoyed that time. So, and then doing it right, showering, transferring back onto my chair.
And then wet and slippery.
Wet and slippery, having a towel, not having a towel. Am I going to slip? Are my feet in the right position? Is everything in the right angle and position for me to be successful in this transfer? And she's, with her son. Right. And so I took that on, and that was, that's something where stands out to me a lot in our relationship and kind of what I look for. And don't get me wrong, I'm not afraid to ask for help, because she would come like, oh, like, can I help you with something? And I would say like, no, like, I'm good.
Right.
Like I was owning up to this.
I know this is taking forever, but I'm fine.
Exactly. I know the shower's still not on yet, but I'm getting there, So that was an adjustment, just a shower alone, right? Because she, he has his routine. I have my routine, right? And so that was one particular routine that I was like,
but good.
This is how it's going to work.
Good for you. And I think what you just shared right now is the anthem of people with disabilities trying to go out into the world. Of course, you cannot go out into the world without stumbling into one thing that's inaccessible for you.
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely
then
not.
You having to make the decision, either I get her involved, but then I'm taking her away from her son.
Right.
Or I figured this out, but it's going to take me some time because I've never done it before.
Right.
And having to make those decisions.
Right.
And then think about all the steps, like you said, the steps that I don't have to think about getting in and out of the shower.
Exactly.
And so I think that's really important for people to hear. Not to like be daunting or scary, but this is how a relationship balance can look with a disability.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the relationship I have with Denise and her son is amazing. It's awesome. I'm happy. We're happy. We do all these awesome things together, like travel. We are there for each other, and I think that support with each other and having those conversations and being open to that is like very important and vital. And
thank you for being so open and honest with my questions, because I know hundreds of people out there who are sitting there with a new disability and wondering, one, if they're even lovable enough to be in a relationship because of the way that they physically look.
Right.
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 But also are wondering who the hell would want to be in a relationship with me when they have so much of this burden with me to help me all the time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yada, 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 or I can't do this and I can't do that. And I asked you the question. I didn't focus on the positive. I went straight forward. I said, what is the hardest adjustment for her?
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I'm sure maybe she would have some answers that you can share with today. It's also your guys' personal lives or whatever. But your answer was not her saying, oh God, I hate this, right? Your answer was, we're figuring it out. And she reminds me that who I am as a person is that overshadows and makes the disability disappear, because I as a person means so much to her.
Right.
And I bring her so much joy, just me being me.
Exactly.
And so I think there's a lot of people who don't believe that that's possible. Like how me, the person, just me sitting here, could be so impactful that people would even forget that they have to help me.
Right.
a
Exactly.
lot. And so I appreciate you being honest, because I think that's something that is really significant for young men, especially because
definitely.
men have, once again, the male stereotypes of needing to be the physical provider
Right,
for,
right.
for their relationships.
Right.
It's really important for people to hear that.
Very
And I tell
important.
people, you're more than your body all the time.
Oh yeah.
And you, the person, think about all the things you, the person, brings to the table. And
Right.
there's a lot of women and men looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's worth it more than you being able to,
Right.
move your hands
Right.
perfectly.
Right. Exactly. Right. No, and definitely, I think especially early on for me, I know I was very self-conscious, and then it's definitely a process and a journey, right? And we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to have that conversation with ourselves or with others or whomever, being acceptant of who you are, and just kind of where you're at and your disability and you as a person. I think once we get through that, or once you can get through that, or once I got through that,
Right.
that was really like,
The sky's the limit.
yeah. Okay, well, now I'm this. Now everything changed after that, and so after that, I just kind of took off with everything else that I've been doing and wanted to do. But yeah, that finding that hope, being resilient, facing that adversity, not being afraid of that. I think that's like what's in being stirred in the pot.
Right.
Adversity, hope, support, acceptance, all those words, all those things. Exactly. No matter what we're going through. And I don't think it takes an injury or disability for us to have that, pivot in our life where we want to move into something really important for us. Because, it's like that saying where some people can learn, do you want to learn the easy way or do you want to learn the hard way? And I'm kind of just talking more along the lines of, sometimes I always say this thing where sometimes we need to get smacked in the face to really
hit rock bottom. All the analogies.
Mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm, exactly. But the theme that we're talking about, that hope, resilience, right, adversity, makes me think about the video that Be Perfect did of my intro.
Yes.
Right, because I shared that, and a lot of people, I mean, at the event itself, it took off.
Right.
And I share that because that, even like people, like coworkers, colleagues of mine, they seen the video. My boss seen the video, invited me to speak at the graduation. Right. So because I'm like, that's me in there, a part of me in there, in my story. And I started really to like kind of from the outside, like, okay, what am I looking at here? What's happening? What are people seeing? What's the message? How real is this? Really just kind of looking at it in an outside perspective to really kind of get something from it, and how can I go about it moving forward, and how am I growing from it, and all these different things. I do that a lot, but so it made me think about like, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because people would tell me like, oh, you're so inspiring, and this is, all this feedback, which is awesome, and I appreciate, and I think it's important. But the reason why I bring it up is because it's so important that for us to, if there will be things out there that give us that hope, and if we can use that to move forward and become resilient, like that's the battle. That's the battle. I don't know if we can pull that up really quick before we transition. Danny, can we pull up that video? I think it's on YouTube also. It should be under like Be Perfect. Honor. I think my name is in it, honoree, something like that. But while you're bringing that up, it made me think a lot about just the possibilities, the hope, the future, how anything is possible once we really help ourselves in those situations, right? So the video really stood out to me, and I thought it was very impactful, and I think so many others can benefit from that, right? Oh, I think we have it up, but I hear it. Yeah, I know. I recognize that too. So how do we help individuals cope when they're feeling overwhelmed by their circumstances? Is like some of the things that, I work with the students, you work with, we're talking about now. So it's really, really important. I just want to instill that message to people. Oh, here we go right here. Yeah, this is it. Where are you going? And how are you going to get there? I remember asking myself a lot of questions like these in the early days, even years after the accident. Really questioning my life's purpose, my future, my goals, and whether or not I'd be able to achieve them. Then one night I remember asking myself, is this how you want to live your life? To let fear and isolation hold you back forever? And in that moment, I felt myself say, no. And okay, then what are you going to do about it? After all, if the worst thing that will ever happen to you in your life has already happened to you, what do you have left to fear? I know it's not easy. Our lives are full of so much suffering and pain. But over the last 16 plus years and 10 annual galas, here at Be Perfect, we've learned something. This night, tonight, could so easily become a pity party. A night to come together in resentment for all the bad things that have happened to us, to grieve all the places our lives could have gone, and everything we've lost. But this community isn't defined by all of that. We're defined by our resilience, determination, passion. We are bruised and battered, yes, but we are not broken. We know this night, tonight, we have so much to celebrate. Because you and me, we lived. That means something we all have in common is that our story isn't over. Each day is a gift, an opportunity to pick up the pen and write another chapter. Every day we wake up is a new opportunity to turn our dreams into a reality, and nobody can take that away from us, except us. Planes, trains, and automobiles is a theme for tonight's event. There are so many ways for us to get to where we need to go. The only thing that's stopping you is you. So what story are you writing on the pages of each present moment? Will your story be defined by tragedy? Or will you rise up by any means necessary and let your wounds become a source of strength? The choice is yours. It's your decision to make. Just know that there are people who will come along on your path who will help you. Let them become a moment of grace not only for you, but so you can in turn bless someone else who right now is struggling, feeling alone in the same dark place you've journeyed through. Will you have the courage to allow your greatest suffering to become someone else's greatest source of inspiration? After all, if the worst thing that will ever happen to you has already happened, what do you have left to lose? Very cool.
That's a great video.
That is a great video. I like rewatching that.
It's fun for your little podcast listeners to see that part of your life.
I really wanted to, before we transition to rapid fire questions, I really want to end on that like message of hope, right?
Love it. Yep.
You know, really.
That scene.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Exactly. And I feel like a lot of people were able to take away from that. So as far as people who have seen the video and given me feedback on it,
it's important to share.
Exactly. So, at the end of the day, all you can do is your best and really, moving forward and believing yourself and having that faith in yourself and others could really lead to, endless possibilities. So, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I am ready.
Let's do it. All right. So for those of you who do not know what rapid fire questions are a set of questions that I will be asking Jenna randomly. She does not know what these questions are or how many of them, how many questions I'll be asking. So first response or first answer that comes to mind, she would be responding to that question. All right, Jenna, are you ready?
Ready.
All right, here we go. First question. What inspired you to specialize in helping individuals navigate the intersection of physical and mental health challenges?
When I saw that people's physical ability to rehabilitate was being blocked, stopped, or prohibited by their mental health.
What advice would you give to someone facing a major life transition following a diagnosis or injury?
Oh man, this is not a rapid fire
It's
question
not.
or answer. Well, I can speak. Let me speak because there's a lot of different people in that community. So let me speak to the paralysis community or specifically the spinal cord injury community.
Okay.
Time is your best friend. Time is your best friend. It's not your enemy. Things are going to take time. And with time, you will heal. With time, you will do things that you never imagined. With time, you'll get back to yourself again.
I like that. I like that. Time. In your opinion, what are 3 key ingredients for building resilience in the face of adversity?
3 key ingredients: acknowledging it, not trying to move over it or around it, pushing through it, which is what everybody avoids.
Right.
When people talk about strength, they think strength is ignoring it. And that's not the truth. Resiliency is built through actually going through the hard thing and coming out on the other side. And so not ignoring it, acknowledging it, pushing through it to its entirety.
I like that. I love that. Can you share no, sorry, that's not it. How do you prioritize self-care and maintain resilience in your own life as a therapist?
Well, I think always making sure to prioritize myself. It's that stupid analogy where you have to put the mask on yourself in a crashing airplane first before you put it on the person next to you. So taking care of myself first and foremost, acknowledging and being honest with myself about where I'm at. So when I'm burnt out or if I'm really struggling with something, being able to admit that to myself and then take the action. And then focusing on my relationships because they are essentially the whole purpose of happiness in this life, I believe. And focusing on my health, health and wellness. So just taking care of myself.
Yeah, prioritizing you. I love that. What's one piece of advice you wish you could give to every client you work with?
I think I say these things, but they can't hear it or believe it in the moment. But that there's nothing wrong with you. The way you're feeling and thinking what you're going through, and that despite your challenges, you are worth loving.
I love that. Last question. What motivates you to continue this work even on the toughest days?
I ask myself that question sometimes. I think it's remembering my success stories with clients and reminding myself that everybody's journey is going to be different. Not every client that I come in with will I see towards the end of their, I'm not always going to get the satisfaction of seeing somebody all the way through the end of their success story. That sometimes I come in the middle of the hurricane and I get pushed out with the hurricane. And so to remind myself that I am just a small step of that journey, that doesn't mean just because I didn't get to see the completeness of it, doesn't mean that I wasn't helpful in some way, or that I didn't do something important, even though maybe things are still chaotic for them.
I love that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was rapid fire questions. Thank you, Jenna. I love your responses. Thank you, everyone. If you had a chance to tune in with us live, thank you for joining us, whether it be live or you're listening to it a little bit later. Appreciate your support. And thank you for tuning in. With that said, Jenna, thank you so much for your time.
This is so fun.
Yes, I love having you on. I love the conversations we have, and I think we can go on and on. But unfortunately, we do have to end it at some point. But Jenna, thank you so much. I appreciate it. There we go. And I look forward to having you on again. You can find Jenna on Instagram at the medical therapist and at our website, themedicaltherapist.com. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day. Jenna.